Hello F11 members and welcome to the Fundamentals of Post-Production video tutorials for issue 80, September 2018. So here we have a picture of the Canyon do Sil in Galicia, Spain, and beautiful view, but I was really fighting the haze there, and quite frankly when I arrived I really didn't think my chances of producing anything of worth were very high at all. But I did get this beautiful light right at the end of the day, just illuminating my foreground there, which I think really lifted the picture, gave it some colour and depth. And of course it's an epic view. So let's talk through the post-production and how I dealt with that haze. So first of all, just going to close that picture here and go into Lightroom. And here we have the image straight out of the camera. And as you can see, what a problem the haze was. Now, if you see up here in the histogram, I've exposed the image as far to the right as I could to maximize my signal to noise ratio. I've got clipping here in the sky of my highlights, but I'm not too concerned with that because what I'm going to do is I've got 3 exposures here and I'm going to merge them. One for the foreground, one for the middle ground or middle tones in the area in the image, and one for the sky. So let's just take you step by step through that, starting with this picture, the foreground image. And as usual, the very first thing I do is look at my black and my white points, hold down the Alt key, move my black slider to the left until I start clipping my blacks, and same with I can't really touch my whites because they'll soon start clipping, not just in the sky but in my foreground as well. So really best not to touch the whites at all. But I am going to pull those highlights back a touch. Now I'm not really concerned with the highlights in the sky because we can deal with that in a different frame, but it's the highlights down here in some of the brighter parts of the vegetation. So I've just pulled back highlights a touch. -33, and I'm now going to use my point curve here, pull down the middle part of that to get the density in the image that I want, and I think that's really given me quite a nice rich feel to the foreground, some beautiful tones there. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. Note that I need nil vibrance because of the contrast adjustments I've already made. I do not want to overcook my colours. Great, so that image that is ready to be merged, I'm going to call it my foreground layer. And what I've got here is the image, which if I take you back to how it was imported, there we go. And what I've done to this picture here is optimized it for the middle tones in the image. And I started by applying a bit of the Lightroom's dehazer, quite a bit, +49, to deal with the incredible dense haze that was lying in the gorge. But one of the big advantages of the dehaze slider is it tends to oversaturate colors, making them very lurid. So as you can see here, I've pulled back my vibrance by -29 to deal with that, and I've added a little bit of clarity, +10. I've also, as usual, adjusted my blacks and my white points to optimize the contrast, ignoring the clipping of my shadow detail here in the foreground because I'm not concerned with that area of the image in this layer. It's just the middle area that we're dealing with here. Okay, and then I've just made a little tweak of the tone curve there to brighten it up and add a touch of contrast. Okay, and then finally with the third layer here, the sky layer, I've added a touch of dehaze. If I come down here, +12 on the dehaze, and I've basically tweaked my blacks and my whites and pulled the highlights back a little and just added a touch, pulled the tone curve back just a touch. Now, as you can see, there is still discernible haze there in the distance, but I think you've got to be really careful, and any scene where you strive to remove all haze looks unnatural. A little bit of distance haze is always going to be there and looks right. So I'm going to deal with that. Sorry, I'm not going to attempt to reduce any more haze. Okay, so now the next step is to open these up in Photoshop and bring them together. So I'll see you there in a second. So here in Photoshop I have my three images. The dark one for the sky image, the middle toned one here, which I'll just call the middle tone, and this one, the foreground image. And what I'm going to do now is combine them into one image as layers. And I'm going to use the brightest, the foreground image, as my base layer, background layer. There's no reason that you should do that. There's no, in what order you add them is not that important. But I think there's a sort of logical aspect to that. And I think it's really important when you're dealing with multiple layers to work logically, because excuse me, it's very, very easy to get confused. So I pull in this Actions tab I've got here, and what I'm going to do is just take the middle toned image there now and play this action, which is called Select, Cut and Close there. That selects all the image, cuts and close it, and then I select Paste, and it pastes it on top of the brighter layer as a layer. Okay, now I'm going to do the same with the dark layer. Here, select, cut and close, play that and paste on top. And now what I have, if I bring this layers tab in for you to see, is the three images on top of each other as layers. And if I click on and off the eye, I can opt to hide or see the relevant layer. So that's the sky layer there. This is the middle layer. There, and there's the foreground layer. So let's just keep the sky layer hidden for the moment, and what I'm going to do now is select layer 1, the middle layer, and what I want to do is apply a layer mask so that I can see this bit of the image that I want to, i.e. the middle bit, whilst seeing through that layer to see the brighter foreground layer underneath. So if I click on Lasso and make a rough selection here, something like follow the line of the river, I reckon, round about there, and nice. I don't need to be too accurate here because I'm now going to play this selection here, which you see these numbers here, they refer to the degree of feathering that I'm going to give this layer mask. And I want a nice soft edge, so I'm going to go for mask 400. Now what I want to see is the bit in my foreground. So I've selected this lower bit to retain. In fact, what I want to do is invert this selection. So if I go up here, select and inverse, now it's selected that top area of the image, and now I can play my action there, and what I've got is my foreground showing through, and that's worked pretty well. Do you think it looks natural? I think so. It might need a little bit of fine-tuning. That's the beauty of layer masking. So to do that, what I'm going to do is select a brush here, make sure I've got, move that out of the way, the right layer, so make sure that the layer mask for 2 is selected. Now using my, making my brush size a nice big brush size here, and come back on my opacity to really very 5%, very minimal. I just want to lighten that area of the picture a touch, and to do that I'm just going to use this brush, making sure that I am painting using black, and in fact I did it with white. I want to detract from that layer mask. I want to paint with black. So I need to just go back on my history here, bring that down, go back on there. And now if I just click on X on the keyboard so that black is selected, what I'm going to be doing is actually painting away the layer mask so I can see a bit more of the brightness underneath in this central area of the picture. So let's do that again. Because my opacity is so low, it's going to take many brush strokes to see anything, but I prefer to do that and go for really subtle adjustments rather than being heavy-handed and ending up with really visible halos. Now I think that has worked quite well. I'm just going to paint there a little bit more. Just keep painting away until you get it where you want it. Okay, that's good. Happy with that. And now if you look at all those accumulated adjustments, if I go back in my history, you can see the difference. But I did it with repeated brush strokes to gradually get to where I want to be. Okay, now let's just deal with the sky. And so if I click so we can see the sky layer now, and if I make that layer active, and we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to select the area of the sky that I want to see, again using the lasso brush. Again, I'm going to feather that selection so I don't have to be too accurate here. And again, I'm going to go for a relatively soft layer mask, bring this actions in, and we'll go for a 250 pixel mask there, play that, and move that out of the way, move everything out of the way so we've got a nice clean screen to look at. And you can see that's worked quite well. I just have got the top of the mountain there is a bit too dark, so what I'm going to do here is just select that layer mask there. Again, select my brush tool. I want to paint with black again and just paint away the top of that mountain. Adjust my brush size. I can go up on my opacity a bit more, go up to about 15%, and now just paint away the top of that mountain just so that we're not seeing that grad line intruding on the top of the mountain. And there you go. I think that's pretty much it for this picture. And wouldn't you agree that that's worked pretty well and dealt as well as I could with that haze? I hope that's of use. I'm going to be taking you back to the Canyon de Sil in part 2 of this post-production video tutorials for this issue, and we're going to be dealing with haze in the canyon again, but with different techniques. Okay, I see you there.